What's going on, people? What is going on? What is going on? All right. Before I actually start programming, I remind myself of how some things work. All the notifications you get about the stream always say programming for a month now, because that's what always is in the go live notification, because I don't change it very often, because what am I going to put there? What am I going to put there? Honestly. The stream title. Does it not put the stream title in the notifications? Because that would be really dumb. It doesn't. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Twitch, for not putting the stream title in the notification so that I can put the stream title both in the stream title and in the notification. All right. Well, that's great. Thanks, Twitch. Talk of mine on YouTube about how mechanics in a game are like utterances in a language, but the audio was poor. I don't actually remember which one you mean. So if you want to like whisper me the link to it or something, I could look it up later. Because I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Oh, it says, okay, it puts the stream title in the text of the email. So people are telling me they're too lazy to read the text of the email. Drinking tea after brushing your teeth with a strong toothpaste is not always the best. Drink a drink that might go with vague toothpaste flavor better. Orange juice, yeah. Okay. Let's get started. One of the things that came to light in the question and answers after the last demo was that the error messages inside a macro were not necessarily so good. So for example, if we go back to our demo from there, and we go into some macro, I don't know, like, let's just say, like this scope lock macro is probably fine. We're going to type some garbage, and then we're going to go here, and whoops, we're going to build the demo. And so we get error semicolon expected, right? At line 104, which is this line. That's fine. But what if it's something else? What if it's like, you know, x colon equals backtick, which, as we said in the demo, references an outer variable, whatever, right? Now, maybe this variable exists, and I just typoed it, I misspelled it, or maybe this variable doesn't exist, and I made a mistake. But I run this, and I get undeclared identifier whatever, right? This identifier is actually supposed to be declared in the scope of whoever uses this macro. Who is that? I don't know. The error message doesn't tell me, right? So what I would like to know is, well, this happened in a macro that was being expanded in this other place, right? And I don't know that right now, and that's not good. How do you make an AI that designs video? Oh, that talk. There's a slim chance. There's a slim chance that I might have a recording of that. Okay, let me not get off track because we could put this on YouTube later. Well, you get the error message twice if you use the macro twice. Well, it depends. The answer right now is probably not, because we halt compilation when we get an error, but at some point in the future we'll be compiling in parallel anyway, so it may be possible to generate multiple errors. Actually, okay, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but the question of what is the right number of errors to report is a very fine one. C++ obviously gets it wrong and just spews errors at you. Like, if you make a mistake early in a procedure and it just keeps reporting errors, and most of them are garbage, and most of your output is garbage, right? And you just have to like scroll to the top and fix the top thing and report it. So that's not good. So because of that, and to make our job easier with this compiler, we exit after the first error, unless it's in something that's somewhat parallelized. So for example, parsing is both parallelized and compartmentalized, right? If you get a parse error in one file, it probably doesn't have anything to do with getting a parse error in another file, especially if, especially because there are no headers in this language that would cause cascading parse errors in both files, right? So in that case, we actually report both. But once we get to stuff like undeclared identifiers or other like type checking, semantic errors and stuff, that stuff is not parallelized right now, and it's not as well compartmentalized. So after we give one error, we're not really sure if that would cascade and generate other spurious errors that are just noise, or whether a different error is actually meaningful. But the more we go and factor the compiler into very separate, clean pieces, which is what you need to do to parallelize them, we also get more of a structure where we can be more sure that one thing is relatively independent of another thing. And we can start generating more error messages. Because when you're just, it's actually frustrating to only get one error message at a time if you're like porting a giant, like, not even giant, like say I take a 2,000 line file from somewhere and I'm just porting it and I know there's a ton of mistakes in it and I just want to get through all the mistakes. It's a little bit annoying once you're past the parse errors to just get one error at a time. And so we're going to work on giving you more errors at a time later, but they need to all actually be meaningful, right? It can't be the C++ thing. But yeah, for right now, if you use a macro twice, we probably exit after the first one. Since \RD means escape in strings, it might make sense to replace backtick with backslash in macros. Maybe. That's syntax. We don't care about syntax. Okay. So let's go back to what we were saying, which is we want a better error message here. So we want to say undeclared identifier, whatever, this happened inside a macro, which might be inside another macro, which might be inside another macro. So we want to sort of report the entire stack of macros under consideration. And we can do this in steps. We can just report the nearest one first and then make that better. Now, the thing is, when we report errors right now, it's not like a so sometimes errors are multi-line. So sometimes we say error, whatever, and then info, like here's the site that declared that thing that's the wrong type, and then info, here's the overload that you're calling or something, right? And the thing is, if we want to hook our error routine to report macros, if we report the macros after the error, then we sort of put them in the middle of a sandwich with that other info, and that might get confusing. So I think I'm actually going to report the macro context before the error, and we'll see how that goes. And if that isn't good, we can, of course, move around where the reported text happens. The main thing right now, though, is just to be able to do that. Okay. Great. Everybody's bike shedding about syntax. Why not add it as a real argument that works similar to references? Why don't you watch the demo where I explain all that? I explained that. Oh my God, dude. All right. Yeah, the whole point, to say it again, the whole point of doing macros like that is that they don't act like procedures, because sometimes you need to break the rules. If you make everything conform to the rules, then you're not letting people break the rules. It's for breaking the rules. Maybe another idea is to filter out errors that are generated as a result of a previous error. Yes, that is also possible. The thing is, it's not necessarily that easy without adding, I don't know, it may not actually be that hard. Like there's a thing, like you could have there's a well-known compiler technique where you have a type called poison that you return when you generate an error, right? Or maybe it's not, I think poison actually means something else. But anyway, you have a type that you return when you generate an error. Instead, so C and C++ compilers right now, when they generate an error, they do something terrible, like they return void for that type, or I don't know, like different compilers do different things and it causes cascades. If you return a type that says, this is an error that doesn't happen in good code, then any other type checking error that tries to match against that can look at that one of the types is that and say, oh, we don't want to generate an error here, right? We're just going to be silent. It's just, the problem is it's just never that simple. So what happens if a for expansion does not define if index or it index, but a for loop tries to give two variables? I'll write down to test that. I think you'll just have an undeclared second identifier, but let's make a test for that later. You guys aren't letting me stay on subject. Sounds like an error monad. Don't tell the functional language people. Well, monad is just a word that means what we've been doing since the 1950s, but in functional languages. So it's no surprise that anything reminds you of a monad, because monads don't mean anything. They don't mean anything. Someone says they do. I disagree. Monad is a mostly meaningless term. It only has meaning within a mathematical framework that certain languages decide to live in. It's just not. The reason, like, you know, every single time, it's a meme on the internet that you go try to read an explanation of monads and you spend like an hour reading it and you still have no idea what a monad is. And the reason is because it's not really anything, okay? That's the secret. The reason is all a monad is a way to convince yourself that it's an abstraction barrier in a functional language. That's all it is, all right? The kind of thing that you get for free everywhere else. That's all it is. And the reason it's so hard to understand is because people are trying to explain something that's almost nothing in these very overconceived mathematical terms, which may be fine. They may be fine if you're specifically, like if it's your job to analyze something mathematically, that's probably fine. Like if you're getting some mileage out of that mathematical analysis. But like, yeah, I don't know, man. All right, let's do some actual work on monads. So the first question is, when we go to report an error, how do we even know that we're in a macro? Because like you don't actually really know that right now, because when we apply a macro like this, what happens is we just go copy and paste this stuff somewhere. And that's it. So you could imagine that maybe we flag every single syntax tree node that's copied as like this came from a macro. You could imagine that we have like a pointer to the macro so that we could find the macro on every node. But that sounds expensive and annoying. And even the flag version just like leaves all these toxic waste flags laying around that make everything more complicated that we'd rather not have. But there's an intermediate solution that doesn't require adding anything and doesn't require polluting like everything. And that is that when we have a scope, there's a data structure for this called ast block. There's a scope there. There's a scope after defer. That has a pointer to another expression, and that pointer is called owning statement. And the reason that owning statement is there right now is that things like loops, the body of the loop needs to be able to know what loop owns it so that you can cross-reference things like breaks and continues and whatever. And also, you know, something like defer needs to know who owns it. Now, that might not, like eventually we might want to try to optimize by getting rid of that. But in the meantime, while we have it, we might as well use it for one more thing so that we know in the end, if we want to optimize it out, what functionality we need. So one standard thing that you can do in any lexically oriented programming language like this is from anywhere, you can just walk up the scope hierarchy to the scope that's at the root. So if I'm in here, right, this is a scope. I can go to the parent scope, which is this scope. And then I can go to the parent scope, which is like the file scope for this. And then I can go to the parent scope, which is my application scope. Right? And then the parent scope of that is like the the compiler's preload scope. So you can walk up there and look at things. And so if just on the very top level scope where I insert the macro, I say this scope belongs to this macro, then that can work. However, there might be some complications, like if it comes from a for loop, maybe we need to set owning statement to the for loop already. Maybe not. Like I'm not sure what actually happens there. So we need to look at that. If we can't set owning statement for a reason like that, there's an alternative, which is to just have a flag on, again, on the block. It would only be a block flag instead of like a global flag on all syntax tree nodes. And that block could say, oh, this block was generated by a macro expansion. And then we could do a slightly more expensive thing, which is you go to the block's parent scope and search for macro expansions and find the one that's that block, which is like a linear search through the scope, which is not that bad when you're reporting an error, right? Because when you're reporting an error, you've kind of given up compiling the program. So you're not totally trying to be fast at that point. All right. So let's take a look at that. I want to look when we generate these. What do we do? Okay, so here, so if we're doing a for loop, we make a procedure call for the macro expansion. That says generated by operator overload, which is maybe not, it's a little bit, yeah, a little bit of an abuse of that flag, but that's what that is. We call it for expansion or whatever you renamed it. It's 4 parameters. We say what the parameters are. And then we set that to be macro expansion procedure call. Right? And then wait. What? Oh, is it that we also set wait, what? What? Where is... I literally just did this, like within the last couple weeks. Okay, right. So, oh, I guess, yeah. Oh, right. Okay, we do this. We do the reflatten. All right. Okay, so here's the part where we actually expand and insert the macro. So if we're doing a procedure call, it resolves to a constant procedure, and that is a macro expansion. We get that lambda, which is the macro. Wow, dude. It's already been a month since I programmed this. Time goes by so fast. Like I feel like I just did this and it was a month ago. That's why I don't remember, because it was a month ago. A single error stops the rest of the compilation. Sounds pretty bad. What do you mean? I mean, it's not the best, but it's like when you're programming in C++ or whatever, you usually can't use more than one error message anyway, so I'm not sure what you mean. Like my workflow in C++ is literally compile, scroll to the top error message, fix it, and compile again, because you can't trust any of the other error messages. So like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. All right. I mean, I guess on some occasions I'm able to use more than one, but they're not very frequent. Okay, so this non-transparent block stuff is something we might change if we go to, this is what makes defer sort of work. Yeah, this cleanup needs to happen at some point. Anyway, target scope is where we're going. This new block is what contains everything that we are inserting from the if statement. So we don't, so we copy things into that block, expansion block. All right. Macro expand. Then we set that to be macro expansion block on the call. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do here is just set owning statement on this block. We're going to set owning statement on the block to be the call. And that call will tell us the calling site, and then we can search up the scopes. So first, let me make sure I didn't make a mistake. Assert expansion block owning statement is null. We haven't set it. And then we're going to set it to call. And let's just run the debug version of the compiler on the demo. And we'll see what happens. I mean, if you don't know, like, if you're I can't believe there's still a discussion about whether macros should be. Do you ever use macros? Do you know what they're for? like, look at what people use macros for. Look at what people use macros for in the real world. If you're saying you shouldn't allow people to do the things that they use macros for, well, I disagree. They shouldn't do them super often if they can do something very cleanly instead. But sometimes your code gets way better if you can just make a thing that does an assert, declares a variable in your local scope, puts a defer on it, and does something else. Like, that's just a good thing to be able to do. All right, so let's actually, we want this whole demo to compile so that we can test that our assert doesn't go off, so I'm going to comment that out. All right, took a long time since the debug build. But yeah, so the whole thing runs. Let's try running it on Sokoban. So there is currently no state recovery in the code. I don't know what you mean by state recovery. Clang reports it correctly if, for example, you named a function a different name and then try to call that on multiple places. I suspect that's already working. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. Why did I say it's a temporary solution? It's not that temporary. So someone's saying putting the owner in the macro scope is a fine way of solving the problem. All I'm saying is that eventually, when we get to the point where we really, really want the compiler to go as fast as possible, we're going to want to make these data structures smaller. Like the data structure for a block is not small. Let's actually print out what it is because we're in a funny mood. So just right here, I'm going to go interp report info block size of asked block is whatever. I guess this technically has to be long. So we're just going to kind of spam that for a second. It's of course going to be the same everywhere, but 272 bytes every time you open a scope in your program, right? That's like a lot. So things will run faster. Never mind the fact that we're already faster than everybody else's compiler because everybody else uses shitty modern programming style. This still, like that has an impact. And so we want to get that down. You know, one pointer on there is 8 bytes, which is, you know, 3% of the thing, which doesn't sound like a lot, but every 3% that you get rid of helps. So, yeah. So like, you don't want your data structures to grow without bounds. So at some point, if we can get away without setting owning statement and by doing something else instead, I don't know exactly what. Maybe it'll be equivalent, right? Maybe it's just like there's a flag that doesn't take any space, but if that flag is set, then that block is also a key in a hash table. Maybe something like that. You know, that's all. So someone's asking about backtick for defer. Yeah, we're probably going to think about switching to using backtick explicitly on the defer. I mean, it's a little bit lower priority than generating good error messages, which is why we're talking about good error messages right now. So my assert has not gone off, which is good. I didn't really expect it to, because this thing is just created right up there, but we're just making sure with this assert. Okay, so we set the owning statement. So now when we go report an error, what do we do? So we call report VA list with error and so forth. Since we have a lot of overloads, I guess the right thing to do is put it in report VA list. Yeah. Even though, I mean, some of these overloads are only used during parsing, and this error that we're talking about will never happen during parsing because it requires the macro expansion to happen, which happens later during compilation, right? But Maybe I just put it here, just for simplicity. I'm just looking really fast. Obviously, we report a lot of different errors in different places. Like, it's almost always this one overload. And my question is that version with all the numbers? Like, that's used like in the Lexer and stuff. So I'm just going to put it here with a note that maybe we want to move it or something. Okay. Oh no. Hold on. Okay, this is not good. I don't think it'll be that hard to change, but so asked here is like our base class that's supposed to be minimal and just have enough information to help you understand like what's going on, like what's the location, right? And what's the type of the thing. Problem is the following. Actually, we have a couple problems. Never mind, because we have the type here, so maybe, I was thinking maybe we need the expression here, which is like one further down. But okay, I don't think that's going to matter. So the issue here is, let me finish typing my comment, check for macro expansions so we can report context. We're only doing this in this, only doing so in this particular overload of report error because this is the one that is called during type checking and later in the pipeline. Earlier in the pipeline, macros can't exist. And anyway, we need and asked to tell us where to start looking. Okay, so that makes sense. So now the thing is, what we're going to get is an arbitrary thing. Okay, if it's an identifier, there are certain syntax tree nodes that contain pointers to their enclosing scope. And if it's one of those, we can definitely work with that. However, there are some that don't. And so really, Like really, if we know, like a lot of the time, for example, if we're doing type checking, we know what our current scope is, or maybe we don't. Definitely during bytecode we do. I guess we don't really know during type checking. So it may be that this is not going to tell us the error all the time, and then we're going to have to get more serious about it. But let's make it work. We'll make it work for the obvious cases. And I'm going to put a little incomplete. Incomplete. What happens if we can't get enclosing scope from a particular asked type, like a constant question mark? Then we are kind of hosed. There might be an easy way to get that scope that I'm not thinking of right now. Like I said, the compiler is complicated. I don't remember everything about it all the time. All right, so we have a thing called get enclosing scope that takes an expression, get enclosing scope, I'm sort of abusing that. So this thing says like, hey, if it's a declaration or an enum or a run directive or a load directive or an import or a lambda body, whatever, if it's all these things, we know how to get the scope. Why is an identifier in here? What? Anyway, we might, even though I just complained that our syntax tree nodes are too big, I could see in the long run just putting a scope pointer on everything. The problem is, though, then you have to set that scope pointer. That actually costs you a little bit of CPU. Not that much, I guess. It might be worth doing. I mean, we sort of need to do this. Dude, the characters appear so much later than I type them. All right. So get enclosing scope is declared where? It's in asked.cpp only. Okay. That's got to change. Who uses it? Get scope status only. All right. Well, guess what? Now we get to make our program take even longer to compile by putting this in the header file. Not our programs, but the C++ compiler. C++, it's such a disaster. All right, so now the problem is, there's quite a possibility that adding something to get enclosing scope could cause problems. So we're just gonna, I mean, just because this is actually not, this error is an error in the game that has to do with that I'm working on this. It's unfinished functionality, so that's expected. So what I'm going to do after this stream when I go to the office. All right, so I don't appear to have broken anything. Yeah, maybe I just put an enclosing scope pointer on every node. I mean, I'm sure most compilers do that. I'm just trying to be economical, but yeah. Okay. So we get the scope. If scope, and then we're just going to say maybe report macro context of scope. And I guess we'll start just by doing one level, but I guess you want to report it like inside out, because if you walk up the scopes, you get the first macro is probably the last one that you want to mention. Anyway, we're going to say maybe report macro context ast block. Right, okay. Because it's C++, we have to do this. We have to do that. Okay, so you know what? Screw it. We're just going to do this. Array ast procedure call macro calls. We're going to say while block is block parent, right? And then we're going to say if block owning statement and block owning statement type is ast procedure call. Whoops. Static cast ast procedure call block owning statement. Okay. You know, I could have some kind of a shorthand thing for this. Like, this is a somewhat common pattern. The problem is, the reason I haven't made like a shortcut for this is just that there's a lot of things that you do that are similar but are a little different. So I can't, yeah, I don't know. Like, this is the kind of thing where you would have a thing that says call equals, is this thing a procedure call? I don't know. Okay. So if it's a macro expansion, then we add that. And I think that's it. And then I guess we'll report them in reverse order. So macro calls pop, and then we're going to say we're not going to indent yet. We're just going to say report info call while expanding macro whatever here, and then we'll go on to say what the later error message is. So name, what's name? Well, it's so resolved procedure expression. This has to exist if it's a macro that's been expanded. Then pretty much like that. Except there's always a trick. I wonder, I think it may be possible to apply an anonymous macro. I've never tried this, but just like you can have anonymous functions, you could have an anonymous macro that you return from another macro and then apply it. I should have done that during the demo. That would have been hilarious. So okay. So we're going to say that. How many things did we screw up? Whoops, why did I comment that out? What did my brain do right there? I don't get it. I don't get it. So I think our intentional error is currently commented out of the target program. Yeah. So let's go put it back here. All right. We didn't do anything. So, why? Well, we don't know. So we're gonna, it's quite possible that the get enclosing scope didn't give us an enclosing scope. But I would think that it should. I would think that it should. Let's just put a thing there. Make sure we're running the right program, which we are not. Okay. All right, do we get a scope? We do. Maybe report macro context. All right. Block does have an owning statement. Maybe it gets overwritten later somehow. Okay, let's make sure. So we know what block this is. This is the block that's the body of the macro, but we're just going to make sure. Line 111 of demo macros. Oh no, it's this block. Oh right, because we copy the statements out from here. Wait, really? Oh. Okay, I know what's going on. If I do this, watch this. If I go back to our stupid syntax error, okay, that also didn't work. Oh, because that's a parse error. Right. That's not a semantic error. What if I say x string equals 7? That also didn't do anything. Great. Okay, here's the thing. I want to debug this and find out why this didn't do anything. Oh no, I know. This didn't do anything because we can't. Yeah. All right, we have a lot of problems. So here we're type checking this declaration, which has the enclosing scope, but the constant 7 doesn't. And that's what we're reporting the error on. So we can't get a scope there. The parsing one was fine. We didn't really want this kind of report during parsing anyway. This one, the reason it does not work is because the way that backtick does its job is it sets that enclosing scope pointer of this identifier to this block where the expansion is contained in. That's what backtick does. So we don't, it skips, the point of backtick is to skip around this scope. So of course we're not going to see that scope. So we have a problem that is deeper than we thought. The problem is that computers are complicated. So I'm not sure. Yeah, now this just turns into a stream where I don't know what to do and I'm thinking about it for a bit. If I, okay, there may be one that'll work, which is if I do that. Let's see what that does. Hey, it finally worked. So I made an undeclared identifier, right? And it's got no backtick on it. So this identifier is actually in this scope, right? And in that case, we said, hey, while expanding macro scope block here, we got undeclared identifier, whatever. Okay, that's great. So I need to think about what the best solution is to this, and I'm not sure that I have one right now. So one solution I could do is change the way that backtick works so that the enclosing scope pointer on the identifier stays like stays where it is. And then when we look up the identifier, it's flagged as backticked, and we use that to go up extra scopes somehow, right? We could do that. That only solves this problem for identifiers, so I'm not really crazy about that, because what you want is something that straight up solves it for everything, all right? A second thing I could do you could imagine that if we did our type inference by recursing down through the scopes, then when something was a macro expansion scope, we could just push that on a stack. And then anytime we reported an error, we would just have the stack of macro expansions there. We wouldn't even need to reconstruct it. The problem with that is that that is not how we do that sort of thing. We do not recursively traverse because we need to be able to be reentrant and, you know, compile a little bit of a function and like yield from compiling that and whatnot. And we're not doing that with fibers or coroutines where we copy stacks around all over the place. You could imagine an architecture of the compiler where we did that, but we do not do that. So that said, at some point I want to change the actual mechanism that we do use for the data structure that we use to infer stuff. There's a way right now that we copy things into a linear array, and that's not great under certain conditions. You can imagine if it wasn't a linear array, but if we were just like traversing around a tree structure with like a zipper or something, that maybe that zipper could hold the equivalent of the stack of macro expansions on it. I need to think about that. That would be a big change to the compiler, but it's one that I've been thinking about doing for a long, I mean, not too seriously because it's a big change. It would like break a significant amount of things for a significant amount of time. Those are always the painful kind of changes when like everything has to stop until it works. Well, a lot of changes are like everything has to stop until it works, but this one is touched by a lot of things, right? So I wouldn't do that during this stream, certainly. That would be a candidate solution because then I think you would just keep that as you were recursing around the tree, I think. Are there other solutions? I mean, the thing that we do right now, we put all the different nodes out in a flat linear array. There could be instruction-like nodes that say, hey, we're entering a macro block. Hey, we're leaving a macro block. And we could use that to push and pop the things. That would be kind of stupid and annoying to add that extra infrastructure. However, there are other reasons why we want something like that as well for other cases, but it's not necessarily worth investing in those cases if we're not going to use this flat linear array in the long term and we're going to do this other zipper-like thing. So it's unclear, basically. Yeah. Someone says, scopes form a static tree. You only need a pointer to current node. Have you been watching the stream? I talked about all of this. I know that scopes, dude, I make a compiler. I know that scopes form a static tree. Is it a problem that mutex is highlighted instead of scope lock? Maybe. That's more of a nuance. Like, what happens is, dude, why is there so much noise out there? What happens is each syntax tree node just gets two things set. It gets a lexical range set on the node itself, right? And for a procedure call, for some reason right now we set that extent to be the argument list extent. even though that doesn't necessarily make sense for other cases, usually, like if you're saying incorrect number of arguments error, then you kind of are talking about the arguments. But yeah, it's a weird thing where maybe there needs to be multiple extents on the procedure, like the identifier versus the arguments versus the whole thing. And then maybe you the thing is, how do you make it not tedious when you're reporting error messages to specify which thing you're talking about? I don't know. That's just a level of tuning of the error messages that we haven't gotten to yet. Put the scope in the task local context. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Queries, I'm on a harbor or dock of some sort. I'm not. You would think I was on a harbor or dock of some sort from all the noise, but I am not. All right. Well, I think this might be as much of this as we do today. I think we might put this on ice for now and use it to help determine which of these other solutions is the right one. Actually, there was one other case which might work okay. Remember how we did an assert false during the demo, right? We did like, in some cases, like if you didn't support reversal or whatever, let's see if that at least works. Yeah, okay. So that's actually an improvement. So our code is going to help, right? So let's do the actual example. Where's one of our assert falses? Oh, if we said remove during tree traversal, right? I guess I deleted that line. Anyway. Where's our tree? Here we go. Actually, which was the one? There was one where we just had a remove line that I commented. I guess I deleted it during the demo. I guess it wasn't the tree. Those are the only assert falses that I see. Why do I remember more than this? Didn't we have like a... Oh, because they're in other files. They're in, because we're using these in production, right? So okay, it's not there. Bit array? Okay, that one, right. Okay, so if it's a bit array, firstly, you can't go by pointer. Secondly, let's make all these compile time asserts. Right, we made this one down here, compile time assert. I guess it was one of these. So I did like, like if I do that, there we go. Wait. That's just a bug. Ha ha ha. Okay. This is a different bug that we have to fix. Dude, chill on the horn out there. What's your deal? Okay. So what should have happened the first time was we should have gotten this bug. Compile time assertion failed while expanding macro unnamed here. So this is good. Even though we haven't solved this problem everywhere, we've given our user additional information in a number of contexts that will really happen. So that's good. We haven't solved the identifier thing. That's bad. And maybe I'll do a temporary identifier hack just for that. It doesn't feel great, but maybe we'll do that. But this is good. This is a different bug. This is just like, because we're using the default name, we didn't find it when we did a remove. Like, the for expansion didn't hook us up. So we have to fix that. Did I work out why we're reporting one row off in the generated code in the demo? No, we didn't do that. Actually, that's a good thing to write down too. I did figure out the problem that was happening where like the demo mysteriously stopped compiling at the end of the Q&A due to like some random change that I'd made. That ended up being like just a general, it was a few different problems that had nothing specifically to do with macros. It's just sometimes you expose new problems in your compiler. All right. Moon phases affect compilation. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. Okay. Well, so my inclination on this particular context reporting topic is to check in what I have, which is helpful in some cases, but not all cases. Make a note, which I have, that it needs to be helpful in all cases. And then we can start to look at some of these other problems that we just mentioned, like this bug that we just saw here. Like if I change that, if I do this, right? So that should work. Whoops, ran the wrong program. Yeah, so it broke at bit 64, which is why it says only bit 3 is set. But if I change it to this, that is supposed to work, but I don't think it does. No, it does. Interesting. So it's only remove? Oh, wait. Sorry. This. Okay. Right. Now the question is, does that actually work in a vanilla for loop? And it may not. Oh, sorry. There's no index. It's just it. And we do this. Yeah. So it works here. It doesn't work in like a custom for loop, interestingly. Unless I use the names. Why is that? That's weird. I mean, okay, before I look into this, we're going to check in what we have. We're going to do one last build, run the tests. Making sure everything works. All right. Still got a few compiler VODs to catch up, but if no one else already suggested it, you could just compile the code many times in different workspaces to profile it with vtune instead of modifying the compiler. Maybe. Maybe. It's just, I feel like that might, so one other thing that we haven't really profiled is like, are there synchronization bottlenecks when you have a ton of workspaces happening, right? Because we don't typically have a ton, we typically have a few. And so we might just end up seeing that, or we might just end up seeing, you know, that the number of threads that we make is like too small, or we might just be seeing that the access patterns when you have a lot of workspaces is different than when we have a few. I don't know. It might be an experiment that's worth trying, but I'd just be worried that we're changing what we're measuring too much. But on the other hand, you want to be able to start 500 workspaces and still have the compiler be fast, so we should profile that anyway, right? So, yeah. When I check in, am I checking into a branch or the main trunk? We are checking into main every time we check in. I don't like to branch that much because, you know, if you're out on a branch and you go for like weeks or a month without checking into the main, then you're diverging from everyone else's work and the check-in gets harder. Like there are reasons to branch on rare occasions, like if I did that giant change to the way that we, you know, figure out which things to do type inference on in what order that I was talking about 10 minutes ago. That might be a branch size change, but the problem again is because that touches so many things, you're making problems for yourself if you branch also. Like almost what I would rather do, instead of branching for something like that, and it might be too messy either way, but there's a thing that you can do where you just have an if-def and you say, if new system, do this code, otherwise old system, do this code, and you make sure that old system stays working the whole time, and you keep checking in with the if-def set to old system, but then for your own purposes, every time you go and do work, you put it on new system, right? That would definitely work for a while for that change. The question is whether it would work all the way through or if it would just get so complicated to juggle both things. I'm not sure, but I would probably try to do it that way. Do I have any profiling on Sokoban, or is it still too early? No, most of the profiling on Sokoban that we do is like GPU profiling. Because that's the main thing that we're experimenting with that can get slow is just like, you know, we have new wacky shaders and they apply to a lot of things and stuff. So, yeah. What am I saying here? I am saying macro context reporting that works sometimes, but not all the time. 60% of the time, it works every time. All right. One other thing that we could try before we go on to look at this other bug is just the double macro situation, right? Let me look for our whatever here. Oh, I deleted it. What macro was that in? Was it in definer? Was it in... Oh, it was in scope lock that we were playing around. Okay. So we're going to go back to this, right? Whoops. Okay. So let's at least see what happens if we do a nested macro, right? So we're going to say nested, right? Nested is whatever expand and 4, 1 to 5 print foo, and then x is whatever. So really, okay, we have to fix that. We crashed in our new error handling, I think. What is scope? Oh, our assertion goes off. Really? Okay. I assumed the gender of this thing, and that was not right. Weird. Why are we putting an identifier there? That's weird. So we could do this thing where there's this function we could call that's like eval to constant. And we could do that and then assert that that's. But I sort of think this is wrong. I want to look at this. Like, why are we setting our resolved procedure expression? And why are we setting our generated, not setting our generated by each? That's weird. Oh, because this isn't generated by each. Okay. Huh. Yeah, like, why am I doing that? That's weird. Okay. Oh, because it doesn't. Right. Right. If we look up an idea, okay. We do have to eval it to constant. Because this doesn't mean what I thought it means. Resolve doesn't mean what I thought it means. We maybe need a different name for that, so I get less confused in the future. For now, why am I tired? Let's do this. So we need to eval expert to a constant because resolved procedure expression doesn't necessarily mean we have a lambda in the ask right now. If there were resolved in this case means just that polymorphs and overloads are resolved. But for example, we could have an identifier that is not overloaded that points to that resolves to a constant procedure, but resolved procedure expression still points at the identifier. Not sure if this is worth changing. Maybe it is. Okay, so resolve procedure expression. Instead, it's going to be can't type today. Eval expression to literal or constant. This null. This with no flags. All right. So basically, I think it pretty much has to be a lambda at that point. But we're going to put a continue in so that release builds don't crash. Okay. Interesting. We did nested. Hold on. we only did one level. So we somehow missed the second level. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Okay. So this is going to be the nested, right? So this call, getting hungry. Line 110 of demo macros. 110. So that's that one. All right. What's the block? Block line 100. What's this? Okay, so we go to the parent. Now it's line 117. So yeah, you know what? I also forgot something. Here's what I forgot. Here is what I forgot. And again, this is something that I need to go off and think about how to fix. And maybe it'll lead me to a totally different solution. When we expand a macro right now, this whole thing that I did about, hey, we walk up the thing and visit everybody. That was predicated on the idea that this scope structure still exists in the end. But what actually happens when you expand scoped lock into scoped mutex example is we don't actually keep this scope with these braces. We just sort of take these statements and paste them in here. And one of those statements is nested, right? And then on the next pass, we say like, oh, here's another macro. Let's expand it. These don't actually get expanded into this scope because this scope doesn't exist, because these were put in this scope. So like actually these live directly out here. And that's why we're not getting a chain of error messages. So what I thought was going to be a fairly easy, oh, we'll just report the macro context. It's actually not that simple. We have to change a lot of things. I'm not sure what's the best way to change them. You know what I'm saying? So when we expand a macro, so that even means that the if we were recursive version of what I was talking about before wouldn't even work, because the scopes are simply not there. They're just not there. This is really a problem. So what could we do? Well, we could leave the scope there. Instead of expanding out all the statements, we can leave the scope. The problem is that things like variable declarations and whatever are in that scope. So we would have to start saying things like, oh, by the way, these things are lexically contained within this scope, but semantically they're not contained in this scope, right? And there might be good reasons to do that, I guess. It's just that that is a relatively big change. It may not be worth the complexity to do that. And there may be a large number of assumptions around the compiler that assume that those things are the same. So for example, we looked at that get enclosing scope function. I don't know exactly offhand everyone who uses that and what for, right? Sometimes it's definitely for lexical inclusion, like are you inside a static if that hasn't fired yet? But sometimes it might be for the other thing. And storing two scopes on everything would be really annoying and complicated. This is definitely an issue. This is like, oh, yeah, we need to think about this. And the funny thing is, it's only for debugging that we need to think about this. Like, this is not at all... This is not at all for correct programs. What's a different thing we could do? Instead of trying to walk up this stack at all, anytime we expand a macro anywhere, we could put an entry in like a debug hash table that says what would it say? Because we don't even have the scope. That's the thing, man. We could definitely, okay. Every time you expand a macro, we could just have a hash table of like mapping procedure calls. Well, what would it be? I mean, there could be like a linked list style stack of macro expansion state. And every time we copy a syntax tree, we could put a pointer to the current macro expansion, which means our syntax tree nodes would get another pointer, which is the kind of thing I was saying that I wanted to stay away from. But if we did that, then every node would have a linked list of these are the macro expansions that generated this thing. If we wanted to make it smaller, like 4 bytes instead of 8, we could put those in a hash table and have a handle, and then you just can't expand more than 4 billion macros in one program, which who knows, you might want to do. But anyway, the annoying thing about that is that that would only be used for error reporting, not program compilation in any meaningful way. So I don't want to spend that much in the way of resources on it. Like 8 bytes on every node is non-trivial. I should count how many nodes we generate while compiling the Sokoban game. Is it 1 million? Maybe. That's only 8 megabytes. But like, can't you handle macros the same as inline functions? What do you mean by handle? Like inline functions don't have the same problem, right? If you saw the macro demo, like inline functions, for example, if you make a mistake, that mistake only matters in that function. Whereas the whole point of macros is they are influenced by and influence the external environment where they're called, which means you get errors because that's not correct. And it's those kinds of errors that we're worried about right now. So, yeah, this turned out complicated or interesting. Let's just say it's interesting. There's all sorts of things we could do. Okay, if we didn't want to take spend memory on every extra node, here's something we could do. When we go and expand a macro, we generate sequential IDs for all these nodes. And you could have a hash table, sorry, not for all these, but like for all these. Like we do this copy operation that says copy the tree of the macro. And when we do that, we can check what is the serial number of the beginning node and what's the serial number of the end node. We could put that into like a binary tree or something, or I'm not sure, something like that, right? A beginning node and an end node. I mean, we put it in a linked list to start because why not? And then if we're going to report an error, we just check to see if the node index is inside any of those. Right? And that tells us if we were in a macro expansion for anything. So at that point, we don't actually need this enclosing scope pointer that we're relying on, which is good. Because we don't have that for everything. So then cases like the number 7 problem may work. Probably will work. Okay, so then and that's also cheap because we can spit out those records for a very low additional cost whenever we expand a macro. And then we only need to like collate the, so then we could end up with a very long linked list that we would have to search through every time we did an error message. But if we wanted to accelerate that somehow, we could build that into a binary tree or something only when we report an error message, right? So we're not paying that cost during a reasonable compilation, which is good. So then, does that solve the hierarchical problem? Yes, because this range would point back to the macro expansion procedure call, which will itself have been copied in here. So that's the solution. That is the solution. We're not going to do that on this stream, but we're going to replace this thing that we did. We're going to check this in for now because it fixes a problem. Let's make sure that it still works and all that. But we're going to do it a completely different way later. Next stream, maybe tonight. Well, I guess I should get ready to go to work. And work on this error message at work. Actually, this would be a fun one to do a stream too. I don't know. Are there any questions about what we've been doing today? No questions. Chat is a wasteland. Well, what's new? What is new? Okay, well, we did some good stuff there. I think that's going to be the stream. We did some good stuff, but it's not good enough and has to be redone. But the positive thing is that that's how you figure out that it's not good enough, is you try it and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about this problem clearly enough. That's programming in a nutshell. The O'Reilly book in the Nutshell series, Programming in a Nutshell. would it be possible to have return values for macros? No. I mean, unless we did something weird. Like, I mean, we could think about making macros even weirder than they are. But right now, if you put a return statement in the middle of a macro, that just gets put inside your outer function, which is what you want, right? We could do something really weird where, like, just like we're talking about making defer work with a backtick, maybe the macro works with a backtick. Or maybe return works with a backtick to like return from the function or else return from the macro. But like, what is that? I don't know. Because then you've got a function that's returning a value, but it's also inserting things into your function. I don't know. Like, that doesn't sound good to me. How can you ask questions while playing Rocket League? Well, that's a question. Well, I consider other countries' keyboard layouts when deciding syntax. Backticks are horrible on Nordic. Look, Nordic people, so first of all, you guys don't want me to use caret, and second, you don't want me to use backtick. You guys are ruining programming languages for the rest of the world. Fix your keyboards. Every single time it's Nordic keyboard complaints. Like, that's literally why I decided not to use caret for pointer. And now you guys want me not to use backtick. Now, look, you shouldn't be using macros that often anyway. So if you have to put a backtick, like, how many backticks are you even going to have in your entire program? It's not very many. It's also Italian that missed the tilde. Thanks for... No, we have the tilde. Dude, that's the Boolean not operator. Wow, hey, we're being rated. I don't know how much longer the stream is going to go, people. We were going to maybe close down soon because for some reason I'm really tired today. Oh, Rust lovers are here. Okay. Parens and braces are annoying on German keyboards, so all is lost anyway. Yes, but the Germans do not complain. Whereas the Nordic people always complain. So I don't know why. But you're a German, you want to complain. Okay. Yeah, sorry uplink coder for getting testy about your question before, but like, so Twitch is a little bit, the format is weird because you start a stream and like, it's just natural for people to drop in the middle and like not see what you've been talking about. That's like the format. But then it's like, oh, you know, people make suggestions and stuff. And it's like, well, we just talked about that. But of course they didn't see that because they just dropped in. So it's just like I don't know, man. The internet, it gives us new capabilities and also creates new problems. So what's new? German keyboard layout raised a whole generation to play games with weird keys. Yeah. So wait, brackets on the German keyboard are not regular keys? That's pretty weird. I did not know that. Why do I use Windows over Linux? Because Windows actually functions with regard to things like hardware acceleration and audio and shipping games to people and not locking up every 2 minutes. Brackets require Alt-Ger on German keyboards. Wow, that sucks. Sorry, guys. On the other hand, Windows wants to reboot my machine all the time to install updates. So at some point, it'll be just as bad, and then I'll switch to Linux. The new Windows 10 feature update fixes that, allows you to schedule that. Can I turn it off? Because I don't want to schedule it. I want to turn it off. Hyped for Debian 10. I don't know what's in Debian 10. Anything that I care about? Probably not, because I haven't run Linux in a long time, because every time I try to install it, it doesn't work. But maybe this one will be the one that works. More bugs. Doubtful security updates probably can't be turned off. Okay, well then, like, that's going to get me to dump Windows eventually. If anything gets me off of Windows, it will be the fact that I am no longer in charge of whether my computer stays running or not. That's the most grievous insult ever. It's highly offensive. I don't know why more people aren't really angry about this. It's crazy. It is crazy that I spent $4,000 on a computer and I'm not even in charge of if it decides to turn itself off. That is fucking stupid, okay? It's really insane. You could prevent Windows to touch the update servers that also kill the updates. Well, yeah, by doing a large string of very weird things, because Trump is president. That's why we put up with it. Yeah. No, it is seriously offensive. So, like, every time people ask me about why don't I use Linux and stuff, it's like, look, I would like to use Linux, okay? I would like to use an operating system that doesn't do this kind of stuff to me. But, like, it just isn't there. It just doesn't work well enough. Like, the productivity hit that I would take by switching to programming on Windows would be large. Or, sorry, switching to programming on Linux, it would be large. Like, at least 20%. It's just intolerable. It's just too much. Like, paying 20% interest on my programming ability for the rest of my life, like that you're broke if you pay that. You know what I mean? So the productivity hit of auto updates won't get smaller either. Well, right, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. If it keeps growing, at some point we'll reach an equilibrium where it'll make sense for me to switch. I mean, probably what happens is, you know, 5 or 10 years from now, I start making my own operating system when I have the time to do that. But that is not going to happen anytime soon. You know what is going to happen soon? Cinnamon raisin toast is going to happen soon. Okay, toast has been queued. It is pending. Here's a thought. Set your NIC as metered and turn off updates on metered connections. I heard that that stopped working too. Like every time somebody finds a workaround, they work around the workaround. Confused as to where the 20% productivity hit is. Debuggers are terrible on Linux, first of all. Debugging with GDB is not acceptable. And then everybody thinks... you know, everybody thinks a front end in front of GDB is the way to do a GUI, which it's not, guys. Stop it. Stop making your debugging GUI be a front end to command line GDB that talks to it over a pipe. That's garbage, all right? Other productivity hits, graphics drivers not being fast enough, graphics drivers not working well. Just the operating system not working on a basic level. Like I said, like having to fight with it to make things just work is bananas. And then there's like second order, you know, there's second order effects, or what would you call them? Like network effects that Linux can't necessarily do that much about, but that that are the result of the fact that Linux should have been better before, and then this wouldn't have been a problem. So like, if I'm developing for a game console at this point, that development environment is Visual Studio on Windows for game consoles. Why? Because that was the only good debugging environment, because debugging on GDB is horrible, right? So Linux could have won 10 years ago that battle and become the standard platform for that, but it didn't. And now, if I want to ship something on a PlayStation 4, I'm compiling on Windows because that's just how it works. All right, we have good buttery cinnamon raisin toast. And then once you're compiling, you know, once you have to be on Windows for the console, in order for you to want to switch operating systems just so you can work on the PC version, that other operating system has to be tremendously better, right? And it's not right now. It's just not. So with a nice tiling window manager, etc., wouldn't you see a performance uplift? No. So all that tiling window manager stuff is not really designed around real studies in productivity. And like, dude, like, I used to use TWM in like 1992 or 1991. I had a 3x3 tiling desktop in frickin' 1991. Or something like that, early to mid 90s. And like, I don't care. Like, I want my code up and then I want to go debug. Like, I don't actually want all these tiles because like, it's just not necessary. I don't know. What about Mac? Mac is so far out of consideration that it's not even funny. Mac is like not even, if I were to switch to something, it would be like Linux or FreeBSD or whatever. It would not be Mac. Some graphics drivers were so bad that they would recompile shaders every frame. Wow, I hadn't heard that one. That's pretty great, though. Debugger on Linux is printf. I mean, it's true. It's Kappa, but it's true. Printf is a surprisingly good debugger, I guess. I mean, for certain cases, sure, but let me know how printf works when you need a data breakpoint. Get back to me on that. I spoke a lot the other day about how USB and all that are bloated, but I didn't go into much detail. Is the desire for backward compat causes a lot of the colossal messes we have today in tech? No, I think the root problem, the deepest problem, is just that computer programming is not a proper engineering culture in a certain sense, okay? Which is the following. Engineers in most disciplines are trying to optimize some multi-dimensional parameter space. And most of those parameters are at least kind of obvious. So if you're a civil engineer and you want to know how to build bridges, I guess that's civil engineer, structural engineer, I don't know, whatever. You want to optimize, for example, the cost of the bridge, but also its lifespan, but also how much load it can bear, but also its safety margin, right? And so there are like well understood techniques that you do to try to get the thing to fit in there, right? And if you try to use materials for the bridge that are too heavy, first of all, you're actually tracking the cost, right? And you know, oh, that's going to cost a lot more. But second of all, it'll make the bridge worse at bearing load in many cases because it has to bear its own load, right? So these disciplines are mature enough that they see enough of the relevant issues and account for them. Software doesn't do that. So like nobody understands, for example, that lines of code have mass, okay? Both in the weight sense, where it makes the bridge heavier, and if the bridge is too heavy, it's going to collapse under its own weight, right? And just in the inertia sense, if you're trying to steer something and it has more mass, you're going to be unable to steer it, right? Like that, none of that what I just said gets taught in school, and it's some of the most important facts about software engineering. And so we've got this industry that just keeps generating as much mass as it can. And that's not good. It's pollution, right? Most lines of code are pollution. When somebody says our project is 5 million lines of code, 4.5 million lines of that is pollution. Like, let's be honest, 90%. But first of all, we don't have this aesthetic where we understand that problem that lines of code have mass. And secondly, we don't deal with the problem that complexity begets more complexity in a super linear way. How do you end up with 5 million lines when it should be 500,000 lines? Well, you start with something that's a little too complex, and it just keeps getting more and more complex, because that's what happens over time if you don't savagely attack the complexity. So that's what happens. So like USB is just a special case of that. You know, Windows is a special case of that. All these things are just special cases of that. Great. I just looked at chat and I see a tabs versus spaces comment. It seems like absolutely everyone is saying we can't reduce complexity, the market won't pay for it. I agree that that's the Hacker News answer. The thing is, it's wrong. Because the reason costs are so insane right now in software development is that complexity is so high, right? Like, why does it cost so much to make a frickin' web page? Dude, it should just be some text and a couple images and a couple, you know, put in your name and it does. Like, it should in principle be stuff that an 8th grader can program. All right? Why isn't it? Because Hacker News got to it. You know what I'm saying? Not Hacker News, because the problem stems back to way before Hacker News, but, you know. Yeah, it's true that the Hacker News website itself is small and efficient. I more mean the mindset of the kind of people who tend to hang out there, who are not, let's be clear, if the average reader of Hacker News designed the Hacker News website, it would be way different from how it is. It would definitely use microservices. It would use 157 microservices. It would definitely use 4 different programming languages, one of which was a domain-specific language made just for Hacker News. There would definitely be some monads in there somewhere. So the bad thing about USB is basically that it leads to more code. No, I mean, it's that the specification itself is so immensely complicated, and the reference implementation is so immensely complicated. Have I ever programmed in Erlang or Elixir? No. all the spec of the previous 3 versions plus Thunderbolt. That sounds great. That sounds great. Okay. Let's try to look at that thing that happened in the Q&A from the demo when we were like, hey, the macros, they're like 1 line off. What's going on there? They're like 1 line off, dude. So we're going to want another instance of Visual Studio. And we're going to want to be able to debug this thing. And I believe that happened just when stepping through main for some reason. So the first thing I want to do is let's see if that happens the same. In both LLVM backend and x64, right? Because then we can determine, like, whoops, is it, if it's a problem that's shared, oh, we got to fix that. If it's a problem that's shared between the backends, then that tells us something about where it might be. If it's a problem that only happens on one backend, then it's a much more of a backend problem. So let's go to here. I'm going to go there. Okay. It sure looks okay to me. Like, let's step into here. Backtick test. Backtick macro. Backtick macro 2. Backtick macro 2 second. It's interesting the maybe I just stepped through too fast. Okay, this is basically working right now. Skip over the comments, of course, because there's no code associated with that. Type macro, type declarer. So this is working great on the x64 backend. Actually, let's step into this iterator for expansion. Okay, this is going to be confusing because every time we hit an insert, we're popping back. It's a little bit disorienting because the insert doesn't have any code of its own. It pops back over there. So the question is, do we want to do something nicer? Do we want to do a thing like insert a no-op for the insert body? We might do that. You know what I mean? Because maybe you want to see your cursor on this line. Like here I am. I'm going to hit F10 to go to the next line, and it's going to go to the body that we're inserting. But maybe you want to see the cursor there, and then step into the insert. You know what I mean? I sound like the tech version of a Trump voter. Well, that's your opinion, man. How old are you? Like the reason why I have very little patience for all this stuff is because I've been around long enough to know how good computers used to be compared to how they are now, right? Younger people don't have that perspective, and so they don't see what a mess we're making of things, I think, right? So if I sound like the tech version of a Trump voter to you, I don't know what to say about that. Yeah. I mean, I literally just don't know what to say about that. Like, I have no response. I really, like, I mean, I guess the response that I have is, hey, why don't you address the substance of what I'm saying as opposed to casting aspersions upon my personality by associating me with other people who you think are negative, right? I mean, that's a usual good tip for increasing the quality of debate. But like, I really, you know, I mean, I know that definitely I make relatively strong statements about these things, but they're not like, I don't think any of what I'm saying is particularly non-obvious to people who have been around a while. Like, people who have been around long enough to have seen this mountain of complexity get built up are like know what I'm talking about when I say things are too complicated, and that there's not really an excuse for them. Yeah. All right. So anyway, so we might want to put a no op there. That's a relatively small issue, but I've put it down on the notepad. But with the thing that we came here to check, which is that we are actually generating the right line numbers and stuff, that looks fine. So let's step into, so this should, oh no, wait, that's not a custom for loop. This is, so this should step into the for expansion for bucket array, right? So let's step in there. Yep, bam, bam. This static if didn't generate any code. Again, that's a question. Should we generate no ops for static ifs that are false? Maybe not. Maybe we should. I don't know. That one's a little bit more questionable. Anyway, so we're checking if the bucket's occupied. Actually, it's good that we didn't generate it for the positive case here, because like I know that we're not reversing because we went to this line. And then now this is going to be the disorienting part, because instead of going here, we're going to go straight to the body, right? Bam. And to the second line of the body, because the defer doesn't run yet. But, oh, and then the continue. Did you see that? The continue didn't generate a line of code. See that? It just went to the, it just went to the defer. Okay. So there's some small things that we can do to make debugging better. But there's no like heinous problem here, right? So now let's try the other backend. All right. Well, we're on the right line numbers here as well. Yeah. Where were we just? Iterator test. Run to cursor. It looks like it's behaving the same. So why was it all messed up at the end of that Q&A? I don't know. Maybe it was something that I fixed since then, because I did fix a couple of minor problems. I don't think so. They don't seem like the kind of thing that yeah, they don't seem like the kind of thing that would have changed anything. Okay, we're in the for expansion. It looks the same to me, dude. Am I sure we're in a different back end? How do I know? How would I tell if I'm in a different back end? I mean, I could probably look at the generated code and tell somehow. Oh, yeah. Wait. Actually, I mean, okay. Yeah, this doesn't look like code that I would generate. LLVM bake new strings. Okay. Definitely LLVM backend. Definitely. So, yeah, I mean, it's working. So there's kind of nothing to debug, which is good, but it's also like not good. Okay, let's fix something. Let's fix that continue and probably break and all that are not generating instructions or not setting the debug point for themselves. You think the first breakpoint was in the macro, then I stepped out to main. I don't know how that could change things, but maybe. Yeah, that wouldn't really change anything, I don't think. We could try that real fast. Anyone remember what macro it was? It wasn't for expand. It might have been this one. I remember I was looking for a really simple macro. It might have been one of the backticks. It might have been scoped lock. Okay, so we broke in the macro somewhere. That's pretty cool, by the way. Can I just say that we just set a breakpoint inside a macro? Do that in C. Just do that in C and let me know how it goes. Okay, so there, we're exiting the scoped mutex example. I mean, it looks like it's on the right line numbers now, so maybe somebody else, it's possible somebody else on the team saw that happen in the demo and like looked into it. I don't know for sure. Nope, probably not. I don't know. It's a mystery. Definer test. We'll try definer test. Whoops, wrong file. What just happened? Definer test. Okay. So we're going to break in definer. We'll get rid of our other breakpoint. All right. Okay. Going to stop, restart. We're in definer. We're stepping, we're stepping, we're stepping. It looks fine to me. I just remember being in main and we were like stepping and we were on blank lines and stuff. And that is not happening. Let me try the x64 backend again. And we'll see if it happens there. Definer. Definer test. Nope. Maybe I had deleted a line in the demo source file between debugging and compiling it. That is possible. I mean, I would have thought that my first response would have been to recompile, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I was just tired from giving the demo. I was specifically on, oh, like I set the breakpoint at definer of 42. So you're saying I didn't do it here, but I did it here? Step, 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 step. Well, we will just see if that problem pops up again. Maybe I fixed it inadvertently. It's possible. Since we are here doing this, though, let me look at that continue situation. I think what happens is here we have this thing push debug expression, and that's what controls. You know, when we output an instruction, we call this instruction macro, which calls this function called instruction, which who sets the debug expression? Who sets the debug expression? Really? Come on. Debug expression stack. Okay, so that gets set. Yeah, okay, here. Oh, there was more than one overload. I was looking at this one. This one calls that one. Anyway, so we set the debug expression. Really, instead of having this be an array, it should be a linked list, and then we don't need this if statement. We'll do that at some point. The point being, let's think about optimizing that at some point. Debug expression linked list. So that's how this gets set. Now, when we do a continue, or whatever, that's loop control. So where do we call push debug expression? I guess we just do it in individual places. We're not doing that in emit loop control. So we're just going to do that. Bam, that might be it. One line of code change. Okay, so we're going to start again. So now, how do we get to a continue? Let's go back to iterator test. Here is where we were, right? So like here, we're in the for expansion. No, we still didn't do it. Right? Like, I wanted to be on the line that has the continue. Okay. I did compile with release compiler. Okay, no, okay, this didn't change anything because we already pushed debug expression out here. So why, when we go there, let's just do this. I just want to look here and make sure that that debug expression is set. I think it will be, in which case, I don't know, man. You know what I'm saying? Maybe maybe we don't correctly output if there is if there's like a one instruction thing. Let's see. Emit loop control is here. So I just want to break here and look. Wait, did I not save that? Save the file, people. All right, I just want to break there a few times. So, right, and then BC debug expression. It is set to the right thing. Okay, which backend are we using? I think x64. No, LLVM backend. Let's do x64 because I find that more debuggable. Like the LLVM backend, it's just like plugging into its own. Oh wait, that doesn't use. I'm being stupid. That doesn't use the x64 backend, as you could see, obviously. Cannot open file. Oh, because I've got it open in the debugger. Whoops. I was running the wrong commands. Let's go make sure that that works, because maybe this was a thing that didn't work. So we're in the expansion. Okay, let's make sure. I mean, I guess this is our code. Sure looks like it. We just generate a lot of relatively inefficient instructions. Yeah. I don't know. It looks like our code. Okay. So we still don't output anything for the continue. All right. Great. So why not? Let's look in the x64 converter. When we turn a loop control, actually, it's not the right place. It's not the right place. I just worked on the debug stuff a little bit. I don't remember how any of this works. I mean, I haven't looked at this stuff super closely. Okay, if we're emitting debug info, if it's a declaration in the output queues with an identifier, emit debug global variable declaration. This is the stuff that I was looking at. Debug context.declarations. Whoops. Dot declarations. Okay, right, arrow, because it's C++. Okay, code view write global. Okay, wait, those are for globals. That's not what I want. I want, when we're looking at a function, when we're looking at the instructions, that's dwarf. All right. Here's code view. So for every line, those bananas that we generate, yeah. So what I'm looking at here is where would I set a breakpoint when we're supposedly outputting I think this is too late. I think the real problem is a line didn't get added to the lines collection here. When we, my voice is going to weird places. When we output the code, so is that in? Subprogram. Right, we push lexical block, I remember that. Output machine code. Okay. Lines add, if BC, okay, here's where we would go. Well, this looks, yeah. So this lexical block stuff is, I introduced this data structure a couple weeks ago or something to reorganize the way we were doing debug info. Josh changed the structure a little bit here to fix a couple things. And I'm not sure if the continue statement issue is part of that or not. So now, why is there a current statement and a debug expression? That's like too many. Like in the same way when I said earlier, like, hey, our syntax tree nodes are bigger than I would like. Like these instruction nodes are also bigger than I would like. And like we have these multiple frickin' things. I don't know. We can think about that later. For now, though, there's a thing called current statement that for some reason is different from debug expression. I mean, you could think of some reasons for that. It's just a lot to store. Anyway, so that there should be one of these for this loop control. Is it not called that? Am I going crazy? It used to be called loop. Oh, I'm looking at a file. Loop control. Yeah. Okay. Loop control. So when we generate code for a loop control, there really should be. So let's look in output machine code. For here. No check in that, and we're going to say conditions X type is loop control. Okay, this is the different place that we broke earlier. This is where we want now. So let's see. Where is this? Line 1322 of string. Now the thing is, we actually want, let's look for a specific one that we know, because if we start debugging this one, it's like, oh, maybe that one doesn't have the problem. Well, first of all, it's on the same line as some other code, so that's weird or different than our case. But like maybe that one works and this one doesn't. We didn't see. So what we really want is to go to the for expansion here. Wait, no. It was in the body that was using this. It was down here. This continue was the one we were seeing that didn't work. That's at line 489. So we're going to say and line 489. Okay. Okay. Remember when I said, hey, you know, current statement is different from debug expression? Well, I didn't then go on to think the consequential therefore, clearly setting the debug expression like we tried to do wouldn't affect the outcome, because that's not what determines this. So let's look at current statement. Who sets that? Emit statement. Oh God, this is... Wait, we set it... I guess we set it once? Wait, what? We set it for the first thing. And then we don't. Okay. All right, well, let's try that. Let's just see what happens. Line number 489. All right. So, well, we should increase the number of instructions by doing this. We push debug expression. It's a loop control, no surprise. Target statement. If it's in each, we get the block. We emit scope close for that block. We output our go to constant. Oh. Okay. Here's what's going on. Because we're emitting scope close for something else, that other stuff is going to have its own target statements that are not this one. So I like have to manually set this one, I guess. But like, okay, when we get back here though, isn't it going to screw us up? Start index is now less. Oh, this is already going to be set is the thing. Yeah. Okay. So it's the fact that we emit scope close things and those belong to a different statement. So we need to go here and just say there. That solves our bug. All right, so bam. Let's make sure it still runs. You never know. All right, so we're going to start. We're going to break here. We're going to go into the expansion. We're going to go to the insert. We still don't have it. Well, the thing is, sometimes there's more than one reason why something doesn't happen the way you want. So sometimes you fix one reason, and that was just shadowing another reason. So now, if we look at bytecode instructions 244, right? Except this doesn't understand our arrays, so this is data. There's our go-to and current statement loop control. Okay. So now, though, we should be able to go back to this. Remember, this didn't fire. We were looking for something with current statement of loop control at line 489. And that didn't fire because there was no such thing. But now it might. Okay, it did now. I think it didn't fire before, right? Okay, so we're adding a line to the debug context. And we're adding that to the subprogram. Okay, so that is better. We were not doing that before. So now, let's just use this instead of the line number thing. It's shorter. Oh, now we go to debug writer. and search for lines. This is going to be the dwarf one, right? So we want the code view one. And where are we? That's just to get the file names. Okay, this one. So there. Okay. Why are we doing all this stuff for file names? Like we pre-allocate them and then we get the file name and then find or add file name for the, yeah. All this file name juggling is going to be costly. Okay. 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 So we're adding something for the address. I mean, I feel like this should have worked. It certainly is an offset of like 44,000. So we're putting it in the file. We're putting line 489 in the file. At this point, it's like, is it a Visual Studio thing? Is it that we're not quite... Let's try the other backend to see if it behaves differently. Like, I don't think it will, but... No. Let me just try a very vanilla, a milli vanilli thing. We're going to go for 1 to 100 if it is equal to 10. Continue if it is equal to, well, 3, 5, break. So for this very vanilla loop, what happens? Okay. What is it? I think it's 3 now. 3. Continue. We do get it. Okay. We do get it for these guys. So remember how before we weren't setting the current statement because the scope close, like if I do this, let's even do that. If I do that, it still works. I don't know, people. Now, wait, what? Did Visual Studio have the old version of the debug info cached or something? Bro. Do you see what I'm looking at now? Do you see that we fixed this and it works now? Why did it not work when I ran it? This is what, like, I don't trust Visual Studio, honestly. I think maybe it didn't reload the debug info or something. I don't know what. Oh, maybe the x64 version doesn't. Maybe the x64 version doesn't overwrite debug info by default. But I thought we tried both backends. Let's see something. So we have a PDB file, 1253. That is the one we were just using. We built. $12.55. I don't know, man. I definitely have had weird stuff like that happen in Visual Studio before. It's, of course, just frustrating, but it is what it is. I'm not completely sure that that's what happened here, but it kind of... Oh, wait. Oh, did I knee-jerk because we went to the defer and decide that we weren't hitting the continue? Okay, this is confusing. I guess it's correct, though. Okay, before we used to never hit the continue. Now we do hit the continue, but we go to the defer first, which is strictly correct because the continue has the actual jump. So maybe I just saw us go from the print to the defer and then decided it didn't work and then gave up, when in reality it did work. It's just I had to hit F10 one more time to come down here and see that it's fixed. By the way, the other thing we don't do I don't know. That's good. I'm satisfied. We actually fixed it. That's good. It's Infinity Ward in quote 918. It's not Infinity War. That's a bad superhero movie. Infinity Ward is a game development company. Infinity Horde -3. Okay, this is good. This is good. So our one-line fix did fix a thing. Let's see. Okay. That's our one-line fix. That's our demo with other stuff for later. That's a no check-in. So let's revert that. Okay. Loop control statements generate debug info pointing to them. That is an improvement. So now it's an interesting thing because of the defers. You know, the program counter jumps up and down. I mean, just like what happens with destructors in C++, I guess. Is there a way that we can make that like somehow less disorienting? So similarly, similarly with the insert directives, yeah, maybe we insert, maybe we put a no-op for those. That's an interesting question. I'm going to think about that a little more, but that could be the play. In debug mode only, we put a no-op for those, and that gets assigned to that statement so as you get to see it. You think of defer as triggering at the end of the loop, which continue jumps to, rather than at the continue before the continue jumps anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I need to think about that too. It could be possible that the way you want to think about it in a debugger is that you see the thing go to the continue first, and then the defer, and then back to the continue for the branch. So that would be another case of adding a no-op. Do you want to try that right now? Let's try that right now. Let's see how that is. Let's see what happens. Wouldn't you want to hide the for macro contents when debugging as a user? No. I mean, you definitely want to be able to step over versus step into. And I'm not sure how to do that, honestly, because it's the body of your thing. Yeah, okay, actually, that's a good point. For macros, generally, the answer is no. You don't want to hide them, generally. But for for loops, you kind of do. I'm going to make a note of, is there a way to do that? It's an interesting question. It might be a downside of doing for loops this way, is that there's no way to tell the debugger, hide this stuff. I mean, I guess, like, it's not hard to put in a thing in the front end where we say, just attribute all the code in there to this statement so that the debugger just skips forward to the next thing, right? That wouldn't be that bad. The thing is, you want to be able to step over or step into. And I'm not sure how we make that happen. Check the VOD. I definitely just knee-jerked and stepped until the defer. Okay, so that explains that. And maybe that's another argument for why it makes more sense the other way. Because, like, I think I was just thinking about it, that I would see the continue come up first no matter what. Okay. So, let's try it. We're going to take this out since this was dumb. We're going to go here. And we're going to have a no-op. Hopefully I have a no-op. Okay. If emit debug info. Now that's different from the optimization level, though. But yeah, okay. If we're emitting debug info, for now we're just going to say not go to constant. We're going to say, do I have a no? I mean, should I make one? The thing is, it has to generate an instruction on the back end. Okay, we're going to make a new bytecode. Debug no op, or just not, because that's what we say. Actually, let's call it debug or not, because it's not for our debugging. It's for, yeah. Okay, and then I'm just going to hope that LLVM does that. Right, is there LLVM create no op? Or is no op code in the IR? You can safely use any side effects free dead instruction as a replacement. Okay, this is Stack Overflow. It's not helpful. That was my first search hit, man. I said LVM no op. It's always Stack Overflow. Function pass. Why is everybody this silly? Like, of course there's reasons to insert NOPs. What are you even talking about? You could insert inline assembly containing NOPs into the IR. What a disaster. Just like the way that people respond to things on mailing lists is like so, like I started reading this guy's answer and I was just like, ugh, I got like 90s Usenet flashback hives. Like it's so like, I hope I don't reply to emails that way. Use inline ASM. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to delegate this part. Okay, I'm going to have to email about that. We're going to make it work in x64. Because here, we can actually do it if we can type something besides Barak. Don't I already have a NOP? I've got too many bin ops, man. I want not a bin op, I want a NOP. There we go. See how easy that is? When you control your own situation? Uh-huh. Oh, I need to put this into bytecode runner as well. Oops. All right. Now, there could actually be a problem, like adding a new instruction in the middle of all the other instructions is fraught with peril. Like there might be me forgetting something else that needs to get updated. I don't know. Debug. Okay. Did I remember? Yes. Okay, we set the current statement. So let's see. Let's see if demo macros runs. It does. Let's see if it did the thing. Okay. Hey, it went to the continue first. And then it goes to the defer. I think that's more understandable, right? That's more understandable. That's the way to do it. There seems to be an LLVM do nothing intrinsic. Yeah, I don't know how to generate that is the thing. I don't work with the LLVM API, so I don't really... Saying there's an LLVM.do nothing intrinsic, I have no idea what that means in terms of me somehow making that happen. Every Stack Overflow interaction feels like question mark. I want to do thing. Answer, that's stupid. Why do you want that? Exactly. Dude, okay, when I was shipping the witness, this wasn't Stack Overflow, but when I was shipping the witness, I was doing some stuff, some like glyph rendering stuff. I forget exactly, but I was asking on a mailing list. Maybe it was a forum, but I think it was a mailing list. I was like, hey, I'm confused about what is the meaning of these particular... Oh, it was for free type, the mailing list. And I was like, what is the meaning exactly of these particular metrics? Is it this thing or is it this other thing? I find the documentation very ambiguous, right? And I got back from several people the most Dunning-Kruger replies, right? They were all, you shouldn't be trying to place glyphs yourself. You should use Pango or whatever library to do that. And I was like, guys, I'm writing what you kids would call the entire software stack. Like, are you not even imagining that somebody could be writing a glyph renderer and ask on the mailing list about this, right? It was crazy. It was like simultaneously the most annoying and useless replies. Yeah, that was my last interaction. That was my last formal interaction with the open source community, by the way. Why don't I work with the LLVM API? Because that was a relatively encapsulated sub-problem, you know, how to get the compiler to talk to LLVM. So it was one that we were able to delegate that somebody else could do in order to kind of parallelize our work, right? Why are you making a compiler? Shouldn't you be using GCC or LLVM? Yeah. Because 99.9% of the people that are asking questions are not writing their own glyph renderers. Yeah, well, I don't know, man. I don't know, man. My initial mistake was not using jQuery for the witness in the first place. Yeah. It's just like tech support. Make sure the people on the other end understand what you're talking about. I think you mean understand that I know what I'm talking about. I mean, I'd assumed that the way that I phrased the question was intelligent enough that you could tell that I knew what I was doing, but apparently they couldn't tell. Where's the Stack Overflow for the 1%? Exactly. That's what you need. That's what you need. Free type doesn't seem to give you any fast way to render SDFs. No, I believe it doesn't. I believe it doesn't. Does the debugger step into defers before returns as well? Probably not. That's a good point. That is a good point. Okay, before we do that, because return is not a loop control. Like break and continue are loop control asks. Return is a, it's just its own thing. Return is like David S. Pumpkins, right? It's its own thing. So, yeah. We'll do that, but first, before we do that, I just want to run all the tests Make sure I didn't break anything by adding a new bytecode instruction. You wouldn't believe the ways people try to manhandle. Yeah, I know. I agree. Like, I'm the one who's always saying most programmers don't know what the hell they're doing, right? So, and I've seen, and by the way, there are many, many grades of not knowing what the hell you're doing, right? And I've seen some of those bottom levels, and they are not good. And not even necessarily new people. There are people who have been programming for years who are like, you know, something from H.P. Lovecraft in terms of what they're actually doing. So I get you. I get you. Okay. Great. Let's do, okay, let's verify that return doesn't really do the right thing. Where will we do that? We'll go here and we'll say defer print hello deferrer, right? And then if 3 is less than 17, return, okay, right. Okay, so we're gonna go here. Okay. Okay, so that's confusing. What happened was we don't emit anything for open brace. That's another thing we could think about. I'm not going to do that this stream, but we could maybe emit a no-op for open brace. We didn't emit anything for there, so the debugger said, oh, he wants to break on whatever's in the next line, which was this defer, which ran when we were returning, right? So if I put an if 1 there, now there will be something that we break on. I mean, okay, that's another question. Like, do you kind of want, when I step into this, do we want to hit the defer? Do we want to output a no-op for the defer and like hit that? Because like it's registering this thing for later, and then you get back to it later when it runs? You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure. But what I am sure about reasonably is that return should probably behave the same as continue. So if I hit F10, it should go to the return, but it's not going to, right? It's going to go there and then jump out. So let's fix that. Let's just do this. Make this more compact. There, and then return, same thing. So we evaluate the things to return. Okay. We only need this no-op if there are no return values and we outputted 0 instructions, but we still want to hit the return statement in the debugger before outputting the scope close if so output a not. So if this and asked return expressions sorted.items is 0, bing, simsalabim. Okay. There. Okay, if 1, if 3 is less than 17, return, defer, and then we're gone. I'm not sure why it didn't go back. Oh, it didn't go back to the return because we forgot to manually, yeah. We gotta do that. Okay. Bam. 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 Oh, wait. We recompiled the compiler. We didn't recompile demo macros. Run release compiler. There we go. Go. Okay. There we go. So I am going to check this in. Now we're gonna make sure we didn't break everything in the universe. On a multi-line defer, it should go to the defer keyword when stepping through the function, then to the first line. Yeah, I'm going to write that down. Did I write that down? We did it for continue. So that's the question, is about the defer. What do we do? Our function name's mangled. What do you mean? Oh, do we need to specifically mark them for them to use a CABI? That will be the subject of our next small features demo. I don't want to go into it now. How many hours do I normally code a day? It varies tremendously. I wouldn't say that there's a set amount. So, commits, better debugger stepping behavior for break, continue, return. Needs support in the LVM backend. And then I pop open my email browser on my computer machine. And oh my God, I have so many emails. I haven't opened email at all today. There's like a lot. Okay, compose to people on the team. Need small LVM support for generating NOPs. When generating generating debug executables, sometimes it's useful to output an op so that we step through certain statements in the debugger, such as break statements and so forth. When I did the break statement version, I guess I always outputted an op. Clean up. If the scope close outputs no instructions, we don't need this no op. And that's a thing. Okay. Add a comment. Anyway, going back to the email. So I added the new instruction bytecode debugger no op. The whole point is to make an instruction that current statement is set to that generates debug info but doesn't do anything, but it does need to exist in the output code in debug executables. Obviously, if you also turn on optimization and it gets optimized out, that's okay. I guess there's an LVM no-op intrinsic, and it's probably pretty easy to generate it, but reading on a mailing list, it seemed like maybe it also wasn't so straightforward, so I am letting Josh handle this one. Okay, there we go. And I think that's going to be the stream for now. I think. I think that's enough for right this second. That's one thing I've always found debugging annoying in debuggers is when there is multiple statements on a line and the debugger can't give you any indication of which statement on that line it's currently executing. Yeah, that's lame. Like, it's the year 2020 and debuggers don't do that yet. Like, it's so silly, dude. It is so silly. It is silly. All right, thanks everybody for coming by. We might do another stream tonight. We'll see. In the meantime, have fun. Let's go see if there's someone to raid you over to.
See? Shout out.
Why is Rami... Why is Rami on a stream?
After this, it looks like I got like 5 minutes left.
I guess he's got indie developers that are presenting their games or something. All right. Anyway, thanks everybody, and I'll see you later as soon as the raid goes off.